Hi, I'm Katie Dickinson, and I'm an assistant professor in the Environmental and Occupational Health Department. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the work I do focusing on environmental justice issues in Colorado. Environmental justice is the idea that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's environmental justice definition, which is shown here, has two key components. The first is distributive justice, the idea that the burdens of environmental pollution and the benefits of a clean environment should be distributed fairly across society. The second is procedural justice. All people should have an equal opportunities to participate in decision-making processes that affect their environments. In practice, of course, we know that all people do not universally enjoy distributive or participatory environmental justice. To provide just a few examples, a recent study found that Black people in the US are exposed to 21% more particulate matter pollution than the population average, while their consumption accounts for 23% less emissions than the population average. Meanwhile, whites cause more pollution but are exposed to less of it than non-white residents. At the same time, white communities also tend to enjoy better access to positive environmental features like parks that can make people healthier. This unequal distribution is not an accident, but is a direct result of historical patterns of discriminatory land use and housing policies. On the question of procedural justice, there are lots of barriers that prevent people from fully participating in decisions that affect their local environment. In Colorado, one relevant set of environmental risks is tied to the recent boom in oil and gas extraction. Laws around mineral rights affect who gets to participate in decisions and how. For example, under the policy of forced pooling, a company that owns mineral rights below someone's home can go forward with drilling as long as the majority of owners in an area agree to lease their rights. So oil and gas extraction is an important environmental issue in Colorado. A team of us here at UOH are working with other researchers at CU Denver and the Colorado School of Mines to learn more about environmental justice issues in this context. This study builds on our past work, including this 2016 study that looked at patterns of oil and gas development and found that in some areas, lower value homes tended to be closer to wells. We also conducted a review of the literature that found mixed evidence on whether oil and gas development tends to occur near socially disadvantaged communities. And part of this discrepancy in the evidence is due to methodological issues, different ways of looking at the question. Beyond the data, well-publicized examples of oil and gas development raise concerns about environmental justice. Perhaps most notably, this case, which even landed a Daily Show segment, involved a proposed well site near a more affluent majority white school. When parents organized to oppose this site, the well pad was moved to a site near a poor school where the majority of kids were on free and reduced lunch and were Spanish speaking. We are interested in assessing whether this case represents a larger pattern across the state. To do this, we are conducting a study that assesses both distributive and procedural justice issues about oil and gas development in Colorado. Our conceptual model shows how patterns of proximity to oil and gas are shaped by decisions at different scales, from individual choices about where to live, to oil and gas and housing industry siting decisions, to the decisions of advocacy organizations to participate in policy processes. To examine patterns across the state, we use geospatial data sets to look at where wells are and how that pattern relates to population characteristics. This map of well locations and population densities shows that there are lots of wells in rural low density areas, but also some areas where wells are butting up to higher density places. Comparing these patterns with demographic data like residents' income and race ethnicity will help us to understand which groups are more likely to be in proximity to wells in the state. Our project is also well-timed to look at the effects of Senate Bill 181, a bill that was passed in 2019 that makes several changes to the way that oil and gas is regulated in the state, including giving local areas more control over where wells are built. One question we will explore is how this affects environmental justice patterns. We're already seeing how different areas of Colorado are responding quite differently to this law. For example, Boulder County immediately extended its moratorium on drilling, while neighboring Weld County is pushing to use local control to bypass state regulations and allow even more development. This pattern raises the question of whether local control may end up exacerbating environmental justice issues, leading to more development in areas that are already disadvantaged. To wrap up, I want to say that environmental justice is a public health issue, as well as a moral issue, an economic issue, and a policy issue. Our current moment shows us very clearly how the same communities that have been repeatedly hit by slow-moving, persistent crises of poverty and racism are the ones hit hardest in a pandemic, and how closely our health and our wealth are linked. Moving forward, finding ways to ensure a healthier and more just environment for all will foster a stronger and more prosperous society. Our work ultimately aims to move us in that direction, and we would love to have you join our Colorado School of Public Health team to do this work together.